right. Hey, everybody. So my name's Captain Jamie. I'm the editor of Peer Magazine, and I have with me our editorial assistant, Olivia, and some very special guests we're going to introduce in just a minute. In the May edition of Peer, we kicked off a new series on kingdom influencers. Influencer culture is huge right now, but we kind of want to look at, instead of influencing for self or influencing for brands, what does it look like to be an influencer for the kingdom of God? And so when I think of people who are influencing for the kingdom, these two are like at the top of my list. So we have with us Jovanie Smith, the JoJo from Atlanta, Georgia. She is the Salvation Army's Southern Territory's Young Adult and Mission Deployment Coordinator. What's up, Joe?
What's good? What's good? Glad to be here.
I'm so glad to see your face. Usually we text. I always love it when I get to see
That's
your beautiful
true.
face.
I send a nice memoji. That's my love language.
And then we also have with us Emaniel Brifil, also probably better known to everybody as EB. He's the Young Adult and Missions Program Coordinator for the state of Florida for the Salvation Army. How's it going, EB?
It's going good. Another sunny day in Florida. So in the mid 80s today, so it's great.
Mid 80s. I'm so jealous. It just got to like 70 here yesterday, and my kids, we were like, oh, we have to go outside. Like, Mom, we can go outside. Such a turnaround, though, because a year ago, if it had been 70, my kids would have been like, where's my sweatshirt? It's freezing. All right, so we're going to get started. We want to talk to you a little bit about kingdom influencing and when I say to you being an influencer for the kingdom, what are the thoughts that come to your mind?
I think for me, when I think about someone who influences the kingdom, they're living, they're a display of how Jesus really had an effect when he was on earth and how he loved different people. Someone who's not afraid to share their faith and also authentically being themselves full on. So they don't need to shape themselves to be like anyone else. They don't have to necessarily go with what's popular, but just really stay firm in their faith and who they are in Christ.
Yeah, so I would reiterate the same thing that Giovanni said. And for me, when I think of like an influencer for the kingdom, of course, living out the values of Jesus daily, but it just comes down to just those two things of just loving God, where you stay consistent within your vertical relationship with Him, and then loving others as you stay consistent with your relationship to others horizontally. So just staying focused where God calls you, wherever you're at, that people see Him more than they see you. So that's definitely when I think of just an influencer of the kingdom, where they're seeing the values that God has in store for all of us if we're just obedient to His calling on our lives.
That's good stuff. Tell me, how do you, in your jobs, both of you do young adult ministries and missions. So how do you take that, what you just said about being kingdom influencers, and how do you engage young adults or youth or even senior soldiers in kingdom influencing?
I would say it's all just about being authentic. I think something that I've realized and what I get to do is being honest in my position and where I'm at with God. I'm not here to change our young adults, or I'm not here to point the finger and be like, you're doing this wrong. I'm here to walk alongside. And so that means, honest conversations of where I'm at with my relationship with God. What does that look like? How things are being shaped? How God is shaping me in the season that I'm in? And also creating the space and environment for them to be honest of where they're at with God, and how do I, as the young adult coordinator, or whatever my job is these days, but how do I position myself to create a safe space and environment for them to thrive and to be successful, and also help them to recognize that that they can fully be themselves and be living for God as well.
Yeah, so for me, I would say it's definitely just with the relationships you do just naturally or organically happen, that you're intentional with them and that you're transparent in your approach. Because sometimes we, as leaders or as influencers, people have their own narrative or their own perception of who you are. And sometimes they may see from their lens a sense of perfection, but you know too often for yourself that it's like, no, that's definitely not the case. Like I'm daily striving to be more like Jesus, and for whatever reasons, sometimes I have some hiccups or I make some mistakes or I say some things or I do some things that shouldn't happen. So being transparent with those people who you have the privilege or the opportunity to influence because of, in my case, in Jovani's case, because of our reach in our role or our responsibility, and just knowing that. So I think one of the other things, just thinking of even of that word, just that responsibility is like, I don't. Some days I guess you could say I won't say I choke myself, but some days I'm frustrated because I'm just like, people look up to me, and I'm just like, I have to be basically on my P's and Q's daily, simply because of that, and knowing that responsibility that God has entrusted with me with, and people who look up to me. I know I have to be on my P's and Q's as much as possible. So just trying to be intentional and transparent with my approach with people who I have the privilege of engaging face to face, and also, of course, just via the world of social media, mainly on Twitter.
Listen, I follow both of you on Twitter. It brings me much joy. Yes, it sure does. Lots and lots of joy coming from that Twitter feed. Also, I just want to say, EB, some of the things you posting on Instagram, they're not bad. They just lead me to like down a rabbit hole. Are you watching those videos, these clips? Like, where is this man finding this stuff?
I think EB got a side job. He got a
These
side
young adults
hustle.
be out here sharing stuff. These young adults share stuff, and then you just naturally be like, "What is this?" And you just like, "I have to share this with my people too." Like it's these young adults' fault. I'm blaming it on them.
That's that reverse, the influencer being influenced. No, but you bring up an important thing though. It is, especially with social media, like all of life is available, right? Like, I mean, you can hide things. Everything is out there, and so I think it's twofold. We've talked about this a little bit before in different areas, but like being transparent, being real with people, uh, like making sure that the things that they're seeing are what the reality is, right? And not giving into that, I guess, temptation to live in a system of secrecy or whatever. Like this is who I am. This is what life is like. This is what it means to be a believer. I'm not going to get it right all the time, but that's why grace, I think, just too is so important, because we don't. We just don't get it right all the time. We're not. At least for me, that's how that works. Uh, and I have to remind myself of that. Like, I have to give myself grace. I think I'm my own worst critic. And so I have to remember, as much grace as I want to extend to other people, I got to make sure that I extend myself that same grace. Jesus is still working on Jamie. He got a long way to go.
Hold on, I got something to say about that for the grace. There's something that Evie mentioned about of being on our P's and Q's, and I cannot tell you how many times where I have found myself wanting to like pop off on people or even trying to prove a point. And I think there's a sense of liberation that I feel, from young adults who do look up to me and they're like, yes, yes, throw like it's like they're lighting the match and throwing it on the gas. I'm like, I got a whole group of people gassing me up. And then you have those who are over you and older than you who are kind of like, you are, these be better. The Lord called us to a higher standard. I'm like, ooh, I'm trying to, but your people are not allowing me to be called to a higher standard. So I think there's an honesty there. I think that this is where I'm very honest in the fact that, there are moments where I am not any holier, I'm not perfect. I get upset. I curse people out. I get annoyed. I go to the throne and wrestle with God or whatnot. And I think those are the conversations that I feel And I'm pretty sure EB could probably agree. Like those are the conversations that I've had with young adults where I'm like, yeah, do I just want to one day be a bum and do nothing? Yes. Do I want to be lazy? Yes. Like there's just like honest and real conversations. Like sometimes I don't want to be on my P's and Q's. Sometimes I don't want to be the person that people are looking up to or people are having to come to for the answers. Sometimes I want to tell some of the young adults, blast them. I'll be writing your comments, helping you out. Go ahead and blast whoever you want to blast. But I think that there's also a sense of accountability, especially in my relationship with God, where is this going to be in the long run? Is this going to be healthy for that young adult? Or is it going to be healthy for even me of how I navigate my relationship with God and my relationship with other students, young adults, youth, as much as I want to throw the match into the gas, I think there's moments where I have to kind of be the peacemaker and almost take the stand like, yeah, I get what you're saying, but because we're called to such a higher standard, you're going to have to bite the bullet on this one, or you're going to have to take a step back and reevaluate. And that's also something that like I'm always having to, speak to myself and share myself. There's sometimes where I want to tweet something and I'll just message EB. I'm like, should I put this on Twitter? Because I feel it in my soul. I want to, but I know this is wrong, but I really want to. And it's just like that's just real honest moments that there's sometimes I'm like, this is not going to be edifying to my soul in the long run. This is just one piece of the temptation that I want to get into, So I think it's necessary that although we hold these very big, important positions, we still struggle with some of the same issues that some young adults have, or struggle with, having to put people in their place or wanting to put people in their place. And so this is always a back and forth and tension that I feel like I go through, and always reminding like, is this the hill that I want to die on today? And it's not. Maybe I'll choose another hill to die on, but this is not the situation I wanna choose. So
It's tough. It's tough for sure. Matt tells me all the time, you don't have to swing at every pitch, Jamie. It's like, but I like swinging at the pitches. It's so hard. It's so hard. It is. It's so hard. One thing I've been convicted about lately is, when I feel convicted to speak out, am I doing it in a way that brings restoration, or that's bringing healing, or am I doing it just so people know that they're wrong? You're wrong. Stand there and you're wrong to be wrong. But like, that's not kingdom building for me. Just is as good sometimes as it feels. It's not lasting, and then it'll end up. I'll just feel guilty later, so it's not good for my soul either. But I think I've been a lot quieter on social media lately than I think I have been in the past, just because I'm trying to filter everything through that. Is my wanting to respond to this, wanting to bring about restoration, or is it just about making sure my voice is heard or whatever? And who is that glorifying? More glorification of myself than it is of the kingdom. So it's tough. Social media makes things hard.
It does. Like for me, I think, especially as we just mentioned, the social media piece, it's kind of like, a win-lose battle. Because there are going to be some people who, of course, naturally agree with you, and then some people who won't, or some people who will read either an Instagram post or a Facebook post or a tweet, and then they create their own narrative of what you meant. Well, what he really meant was blah, 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 or X, Y, and Z, and never have, again, just what we talked about earlier, having being intentional in your relationships, having that one-on-one conversation. And I think some of what Jovanie was alluding to, like I'm there probably 4 or 5 times a week where grace and wrath meets. I know a lot of people like to say where grace and mercy meet, but I'm more of sometimes of grace and wrath, where I'm just like, well, I feel like I can be graceful and still, I guess you could say, rebuke this evil rhetoric from this individual, from this institution, or from this place, or from this video, or from this tweet, or from this meme, where it's like a lot of things are just not, at least for me, at a place now where it's not just so funny. It's like, what is this doing for the kingdom? And I know some days I wake up and just words from one of my mentors is always there of like, what you're doing today, like, is it beneficial or detrimental to your walk? And for me, that's something that I always try to think about. And it's somebody who we all know, Dr. Marion Platt. But we was just having a conversation one day, and that was one of the things that just stuck with me. And this is maybe 6, 7 years from that conversation. And like, it keeps me in a place of just remembering certain things before I either post something or I say something or I send a text. And I know Jovanie says she sometimes texts me. I know you can ask Captain Jamie or Captain Matt. Like some days I'm texting them and like, I should post this or I should send this email, and then both of them are like, no, don't do that. Like, stop. Or Captain Jamie like, quickly tell me like, I get what you're trying to say, but that's way too petty. Like, don't even do it. Don't even think about it. Like, why is that even in your phone right now? So it's having people within your life as well. I would say that you can text or that you can call and say, I feel like I have to get it out because I don't want to suppress these feelings, and then I blow up on somebody, and then everybody just wonder like, wow, what happened to EB? Like, that's not the EB that I know. And then those who really know me will be like, EB been feeling like that. He just never said anything. So it's just thinking, just how you navigate your friendships or your relationships with people who, I guess you could say, who you love, but also who you can trust and who trust you. Like, there's a two-way street within that.
For sure. Yeah, we have friends who, like, we have a pact that if you need to yell, because sometimes, like, you just can't call your DC and yell at him. It's just not, that's not wise. So we have friends who we call and say like, okay, right now you are going to be my supervisor and I am going to yell at you so that I don't actually do it and get myself into trouble. And then, usually they come back and they're like, okay, now let's like actually reasonably talk about this and see, maybe I need somebody to tell me, you know what, you are wrong. Like, okay. And because I love them and trust them, I can hear that. But it's always smart to have those people in your life so you don't yell at your boss. Joe, I'm gonna ask you a question specifically. Tell me so how long have you been at the youth department at THQ?
Ooh, I think I'm going on 6 years, 5, 6 years. Feels like a blur.
What's your favorite? What's your favorite thing? Like, what is it that you're like? Okay, I get to go do this today.
I think my favorite part of what I do, which is wild because I do a lot of mission trips, and I think people automatically assume that it's like going to these different countries or setting up these things. But I think my ultimate favorite thing about my job is training and leading young adults. So I get the opportunity to spend, whether that's through our mission program, whether that's through our territorial events, just any time that I get to be in community with other young adults and be able to cut up, lead, share, create the space, I think that is my ultimate favorite thing to do. And so, like, a prime example, before the pandemic, whatever we want to call this, but I would lead. I would lead orientation for our mission teams, and it's just a week at camp. And that is probably, I mean, the most stressful, but it's my favorite time because I get to know the young adults that I get to send overseas. They get to know me. We have inside jokes. They know all the small little quirky things that I enjoy. It's I think that's like the biggest thing that I would say is my favorite part is getting to be in community with these young adults, and then and also have this long lasting relationship with them even after.
So now you get to lead Summer Service Corps. How many times did you do Summer Service Corps as a team member?
I did it twice. The first time I did it, I was actually asked by Joy Michaels, and I told her. I think I told her twice that I did not want to do it. I remember them showing it at youth councils, and my first thing was like, "You are not sending me overseas. You're not sending me nowhere with 7 other strangers. I'm just not doing it." So that was and that was my excuse every time with her. You cannot, I don't, I can find God at camp. I can find God at the Haitian church down the street. I could find God at my parents' inside. I was like, I don't need to go overseas or even be at home to be doing all this. I don't need to be around people for that amount of time, being stuck in some shack to discover Jesus. So like I was very like, no, I'm all right. Like you could keep it. I will support all the people, but I don't need to be there. So I did it twice. I did it 2 times in a row.
Where'd you go?
So I went to Mexico my first year, and we went to Mexico City, Merida, and Cancun, and not like the Cancun resort spot, like outside ghetto Cancun, like where people don't want to see Cancun. Um, and then I went to I'm keeping it all the way real. And then my second year, I served in the States. I served in the Southern Territory, and we went to Baton Rouge, Jackson, Mississippi, Atlanta, and Baltimore. And I would say the one that shook me the most was serving at home than serving in Mexico, because I think that was the first time I saw the flawedness, like how flawed we were as a territory, and how there were so many different ministries, and not flawed in a bad, like not saying that like, oh, we're bad, but just in a way like I have not seen this side of different ministries and different cores or different people, or I didn't expect people to kind of struggle or have issues per se, so I think that was very hard for me to do that. And even now, full circle, I've lived in Atlanta for almost 5-6 years, and now it just like it's wild. So when I went, I mean, I remember I sat right across Hillary DeJarnett, who is now the sex trafficking person here at THQ, but before she was working at the Croc, and she would just be on Craigslist finding women who were going through sex trafficking and just be calling them up. Or I like witnessed her like calling out a pimp, and I'm like, ma'am, you a little small white girl over here about to cuss out a whole pimp to let go. So it's just like, it's wild to me. I really felt like the people that I got to serve with had no fear in some of the things that they were going against. Like they just had no fear of the issues that were going on in the community, the sin, like it was just like they woke up and they knew what God had put on their heart. And they moved. Like they're just like, okay, we about to go get this, let's go. We got to hold people accountable, let's go. So it was very much an eye-opening experience serving at home, as well as it was an eye-opening experience serving overseas as well.
I have a follow-up question for that. How do you think that experience and all those experiences has shaped your role, your current role, with your impact on youth?
I think it really set me up in a way that I was not going to sugarcoat our training, and it was also important for me to call our kids out within our territory that we're going on these trips. I think that it is such a great experience, but I also think that there is a privilege to be a part of these types of trips. And so my experiences really almost checked me. Like I was checked as a young adult. I was checked of my own comfort and privilege as a young adult when I was here. And so it was necessary for me to speak that same type of energy to our youth and young adults. And not in a way of just like, oh, you get whatever you want, but just recognizing like things don't revolve around you like you think it does. Like you just can't step into missions thinking you're going to take a paintbrush and go paint a concrete wall and give yourself a pat on the back. Like you need to be serious about your relationship with God. You need to be serious about, what does conflict look like? How does your emotions come up? And so for me, I think it was very important for me to not only tap into the spiritual portion, but also tap into the leadership portion. So we're dealing with 18 to 25-year-olds, and there's some, no shade for whoever's watching it, but there's some young adults who don't know their social security number. That's a problem. you 18 years old. Like, there are ways that you should be living that you need to be prepared. Like, if you get upset, are you just going to cuss out every single person you get upset with? No, let's use our words and have a conversation. So I recognized that I was having to almost reteach this to other people. It was common sense for me, is not common sense for everybody else, which is great because there's a lot of things for me. Like, I had to learn how to be patient as a leader. And I've always said this, where I've always told all my teams, I don't like repeating myself. If I say it once, you should be able to get it. And what happened? I ended up repeating myself several times. And so there was a sense for me where I was being challenged to be patient and to be, to also walk alongside people, where this was a big task to be, there's kids who've left home and there's kids who've never left home. And so for me, I left home when I was 18. And then there's people like, this is the first time I'm leaving my parents. Like, I'm leaving someone that I see every day. And so I had to be patient and very sensitive to to individuals' emotions and what they're going through. I couldn't just cut people off, be like, well, girl, come on, let's wrap this up. We're about to go. Say bye-bye to mom and dad. We're going to see them in July. I just could not come in that I could not give that energy, because a lot of people were on different scales with emotions and how they did, and how they processed that. So I think my experiences really gave me a wide range of teaching moments, not only for myself, but for those who I got to serve. And I'm so happy that I got an international experience and also an in-home experience.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we can switch over to EB. You served the youth in the Florida division. What is your kind of favorite thing about serving the youth and having an impact on the youth?
It's the DYS. That's his favorite thing. Right.
No. Nah, it's not a DYS.
We're going to end right now.
It's tough. It's tough. It's tough. I say it's tough only because it's so many good things that happen, to just try to pinpoint one. So I'm sorry, Olivia, but I'm gonna hit you with two things that are, I would say, my favorite. One is seeing our young people, our youth and our young adults within their natural habitat. And when I say natural habitat, I'm not calling these kids animals in cages or anything like that. But like, when you get to watch them on social media, you see a side of them that you don't always get to see at an event or at camp. And it's just like, oh, that's what we're wearing today. Okay, let me keep scrolling and get away from that. Or, oh, that's what we posting today. Okay, let me send you a text on the slide to say, screenshot it, just so they can know that, for many of them, I would say, I won't say big brother EB or uncle EB, but like EB's watching, so to speak. And it's just like, this not who you really are, or this not who you say you want to be. But just watching them be themselves, because it's not my job to, I guess you could say, micromanage their spiritual walk. It's for me to guide them and for me to be an example of that. Like for me, one of my favorite, I guess you could say, scriptures is 1 Corinthians 11:1. Basically follow my example as I follow the example of Christ. So for me, if I'm following Christ's example and they're following me, ultimately they're not really following me, they're following him. And I just happen to be the vessel that God is using in that time. So that's definitely one of my favorite things for them, is just watching them in their natural habitat, or via social media. And then the other thing would have to be, I have the privilege now in 2020, I know you said, I think around last summer, when we didn't have our summer camp in person, at least, that really sucked. But prior to that, I have the privilege of being at camp with our DYSs, and I just serve as just another voice and an advocate for them, but also kind of like a mediator or like a middleman between our amazing leadership team and our amazing young people. And we tried to just put a title on it as like Dean of Staff, but where you heard some very, very, at time, troubling stories of what your people and your young people are going through. And you're just sitting there trying to figure out, how do I help this young man or this young woman through this situation? And I know Captain Jamie can tell you countless times where we would basically because we had daily, I guess you could say, leadership team meetings, and we're going through situations of what a kid is facing back home, or what a kid may have faced at camp, or an experience they may have had in the past. And you're like, how do we solve this issues? So again, getting to that point where you're intentional with your people, and then they just open up in spaces where at times you're like, oh man, I didn't want to know that. Like, or we see stories, or and Captain Jamie can definitely remember this one, and I won't say a name, of course, but where some of our young people were working at camp, and basically their whole check was being confiscated by mom and dad back home. Where it's just like, hey, EB, I'm going to give you cash, but I need you to cash at my mom because this has to get done. And we're not talking about like young adults. This one, we're talking about 16, 17-year-olds paying for mom and dad card to get fixed, or paying for the lights to stay on, or to pay to make sure food is in the house for younger siblings who's not at camp. And it's like, I can't imagine that, because I didn't have to experience that as a young person, even though I worked at camp. But my mom and dad, and even Jovanie's parents at the time were Captain but Major Pierre Smith. The only thing they worried about was, hey, make sure you're paying your 10%. Like, pay your tithes and we're good. And you can kind of do whatever with your money. I would prefer for you to save your money. I would prefer for you to put it in the bank. I would prefer for you to think about those really expensive shoes that you want for school. You're going to pay for them on your own. I'll buy you some basic shoes that's name brand or whatnot. But those Jordans that you want, that's coming out of your camp money. So hearing those stories at times, though at sometimes it was very, very heartbreaking, it was definitely probably one of my favorite parts, because then you also, I would say, if I were to flip it, you also have those great stories of success. And I say success in those moments where people come to Jesus, those moments where young people saying they want to shift or they want to change their life, or I've been coming to church my whole life, but I haven't really experienced Christ the way I'm experiencing him in this moment or in this season, maybe at a youth councils or at a Territorial Youth Institute or even at camp, and I want my life to change. Or, hey, Captain Jamie, EB, Captain Matt, like, I'm going to college, and nobody in my family has ever gone to college. And then now me and Captain Jamie, we're walking through helping kids register for classes, or making sure they're doing their FAFSA, or letting them know, like, hey, you graduated Core Cadet, make sure you fill out your Core Cadet application for the scholarship money. So, like, seeing people potentially break generational cycles within their family. And it's like, this is amazing. Like, this is why we do what we do. And this is what I love about, you have those highs and lows. But I will say it's definitely more highs than lows that I get a chance to experience. So that would probably be my two: watching kids via social media and just be themselves, and know that spiritual their spiritual walk is a journey, right? It's a marathon and not just a sprint, as Captain Matt always likes to say. And then also hearing their highs and lows, in that sense of, I think Jovanie alluded to it earlier, of having that sense of liberation, like where they feel free, like they feel comfortable enough to share with me their highs and their lows. And that trust that they place in me is definitely one of I would say, one of my favorite things in my role or my job.
So I do want to, both of you guys, as part of your sphere of influencing, you have a voice. Both of you have podcasts. So I'm going to give you a second if you want to tell us a little bit about your podcast. Like, what are your goals through that? How are you influencing through that? And then if you want to pitch where they can find you, you can do that too.
So my podcast is called A Cup of Joe podcast. You can find me on iTunes and Spotify. And it all started me trying to find an outlet and trying to do something, and now it's become a thing. And so the podcast is basically set up to talk about anything and everything. No topic is off subject. So I have talked about anxiety and depression. I've talked about sex. I've talked about my parents. I've talked about politics. I've talked about Black History Month, racism. I've even talked about my woes about being a grad student, talked about cultural trends. So my podcast really is for anyone and everybody who wants to listen. I sometimes don't realize that there are people that are within the Army that listen. Sometimes I get shocked. That's how my parents listened to my sex episode, which was awkward, but also very interesting. Their thoughts were very, very interesting. So I was very happy to have that conversation. So yeah, you could check me out. I love it. My goal for this, huh?
No, I was just gonna
What did
say
you
I
say,
can just
Jamie?
hear Pierre now. I was say I could just hear Pierre now say, Jovanie.
Yeah, he
Mm.
was just all the questions came out of him. My goal, honestly, is it became a hobby, but it's now become something that I love to do. I don't know if it'll be something full time, but for right now, my goal is just to give. I mean, if it's 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, an hour, I want to give solutions and also make people happy throughout the day. So not shying away from conversations and letting people feel good, just a little dose, a little sprinkle of excellence for the people. That's all.
Yeah, so I would say I would definitely recommend you guys to go listen to A Cup of Joe. Whether you go to her website, like she mentioned, or you wherever you get your podcast at, you'll see a bright yellow background and a beautiful face. You really can't miss it. And that same joy that you see in that picture is the same joy that you get via the podcast. And I will say she definitely don't have no subject or topic that's off limits. Some days you just see the title and like, oh yeah, I'm definitely listening to this. Just because of the title alone is very, very captivating. And one of the things now I appreciate from top to bottom because like it's literally always high energy. And I'm just putting the plug out for you a little more, Joe, because I know you don't like this part. So I'm going to continue, I guess, amping you up or gassing you up, as you would say. But she also has a moment in there where she does a sprinkle of excellence, where she's highlighting and showing love to literally people all across the globe. And for me, it's always good because, I always tell people this: all of your friends don't have to be your next friend's friends. Like all friends, like it's okay to have different circle of friends. So hearing stories of other people who she knows, like takes me down a rabbit hole of finding a little bit more about them. And sometimes even some of them, because of if they're like I guess you could say a creator or a curator of content, I sometimes just start following them because of just of the way she encouraged that person or talked about that person. I'm like, dang, this person sound dope. Like this is next level. Who is this? So that's really, really dope. So I appreciate that, Joe. For me and two of my friends, or I would say our friends, Captain Jamie and Jovanie, I'm on a podcast called The Kickback, and it's spelled DAKICKBACK, and it's with Sharika and Sabrina. And with that, what we do is we basically do the same thing Giovanni mentioned. We just talks about daily or current events, and then we try to give people some final words of wisdom of what we think is important to them or for them. I would say, as far as a goal for the podcast, it's for people to just think outside the box, get outside of their comfort zone, and get familiar with things that maybe outside of their own culture. So we do this section at the end of we recommend, where we all three of us will recommend something for the listeners. It's sometimes a book or a Netflix series or a show on TV. I know by the time this comes out, it might be old for some people, but one of the things that we are recommending for everybody is to make sure you go watch, and I don't even know if I can say this on here, but I am. But the Harry and Meghan Markle interview with Oprah, because that was just like, whoa, okay. Thank you for this insight within we call it the royal entanglements, because that's what it was like for us. But it's just one of those things of just information that people normally wouldn't go look for because they have their own life, which is great. So that's just something to I guess you could say our expectations is just to put people up on game of things that they usually won't pay attention to.
I guess for the both of you, we kind of want to ask, and as part of this interview series, is that how can teens, you talk about like influencers, but how can teens and young adults get involved in the church today? And especially, how can they influence for the kingdom? Like if they kind of look up to you and influencers like you, how can they also influence the next generation? Because I think it's Generation Alpha, but so.
Yeah, definitely. So I would say one of the ways that they can get involved with the church and um, I would say find out not only one, what you're good at, because I know sometimes people say go with what you're good at or what you're passionate about, but pray over what God is calling you to do, because sometimes what you might be passionate about or might be what you're good at, that might not be what God is desiring from you. And you might have to figure that out. And that's what we, talk about, just that holy pruning that sometimes that needs to take place, or that sharpening of yourself and getting out of your comfort zone at times. But you find maybe it does start with something you're good at. So if you're an athlete, and I'm just thinking of a young adult, if you're an athlete and you love either working out or you love training people in basketball or football or soccer or baseball or tennis, then you're connecting with the younger generation of saying, hey, core officer, or hey, pastor, or hey, youth leader, once a month or maybe twice a month or every week, I want to spend 15 to 30 minutes of going through exercise and drills with some of our young people with Generation Alpha to pour into this next generation. And not only are you letting them know the importance of health and fitness, but they're also seeing a visible sign of somebody who's pouring into their life. And with that, you can always sprinkle in a little bit of what is God doing in your life? How is God working? How is God moving? What is God expectations for you and for that next generation? And just thinking through, like, what does this intergenerational, I guess, makeup or ministry look like for the long run on behalf of the kingdom? So, like, I think everybody has the potential to be an influencer. It's just sometimes we tend to gravitate towards bad influencers within our life, because it's easy to see the group that sometimes is at the corner store hanging out, or on the corner hanging out, or causing the trouble in class at school, than to recognize those who are trying to edify the body of Christ via works of the kingdom. So that's one way I always try to tell people to tap in or dive in. So whether it's in your church, whether it's volunteering at a local school, whether it's Big Brothers Big Sisters, whether it's a local Boys and Girls Club, where the young people are everywhere, whether it's on social media, like, how is what you're putting out beneficial to their upbringing or their well-being, and just being reminded, or committed to that. So that's definitely one way. And it's just, ask the questions, lock in with your local pastors or local core officers, and say, hey, I want to help the next generation to be better than me. Where can you use me? Where can I plug in?
Yeah. I mean, I agree with what EB just said. I think it's so everyone has something to offer. This generation has one thing to offer, and I think if you can tap into what is that niche, what's that thing that drives you, what's something that God is putting on your heart, where you're waking up every day and you just it excites you. You want to put some meat to the skeleton. I think it's important to be able to be transparent and honest with your leaders, and bring that to the front part. Say if you want to lead. I think that, well, we can't. I would also say, don't let anyone box you in either. It's okay if you're not hitting the traditional ministries or the traditional things that we see in a church. But I would also just be aware of, like, your strengths and what God has placed on you, and also surrounding yourself with people who are going to continue to push you and support you in that.
Okay, we're back. Sorry, guys. We had a little bit of a technical difficulty, and we lost one of our guests, Jovanie. I'm sorry, Jovanie, that our technical glitch made it to where you couldn't finish this conversation with us. We're going to wrap things up real quick. And Olivia, I'm going to go ahead and let you, since since it kicked me out and I didn't hear the last thing you asked them, I'm going to let you go ahead and wrap this up. We do want to say a big thank you to EB and to Jovanie for joining us today and sharing with us a little bit about their thoughts on being kingdom influencers. We appreciate you taking your time and hanging with us through this insane technology.
Well, I also asked, where can our followers find EB and Jovanie?
So for me, I would say the two easiest places is the lovely world of Instagram and the lovely land of Twitter. And it'll just be at EBRIF as in Frank IL, on both social media sites. I know most of you who will peep this, you won't be on Facebook, so I won't even give you that information.
Well, you can actually find EB on Peer because he's Peer's podcast reviewer. So
That I
stay tuned.
am. You definitely can find me there as well.
Yeah,
That's right. Be sure to check them out there. And be sure to keep an eye out for this series in the Peer Panorama column starting in the May edition. And so EB and Jovanie will show up in the print edition for the summer magazine. So be sure to follow up there where you can see kind of the print wrap up of our conversation. Thanks for joining us, EB.
Always. It was a pleasure. Thank you, Captain Jamie. Thank you, Olivia.
Have a great day.